Hi, so in this video, I'm only talking about expat Greg, uh, a fellow expat who became homeless in the Philippines. Um, he wasn't a homeless in his own country, where he came from. This is the United Kingdom. He said that he came in the first video that was, that came about a year ago. He was interviewed by another YouTuber like a year ago, um, in Cebu City, where he was living, um, in a like a makeshift, uh, front, of a fence. He had his like a little bed. He was like cooking, from something like a cooker, and of course he was just, begging, people passerby, people who were passing by. This could mostly, local Filipinos, and they helped him a lot. In this case, in situation in which he was an expat who became a homeless in the Philippines. But now, how this everything developed, that it made me reflect. It made me think inside me. I mean, just that in a way that he came from a wealthy country, like the United Kingdom, with good benefits, um, with good social, structure that helps a lot of, people in lower condition, people without job, in, in, in the United Kingdom. And of course, he was, this fellow Greg who just passed away 2 days ago. And he was telling a story about how really he fell off, of society, how, ended up living in the streets. And the way he explained it was that, things went that he had he when he came to the Philippines, he had some money, he had some funds, and that he was working. But things didn't go the way he wanted to go. He even had a girlfriend in the Philippines, but things didn't turn out to be, the way he saw the future coming, which is most expert, that's the most expert's dream, coming, to a foreign land to, find that second opportunity to have a good life. And what happened to him was, I mean, it, it could happen to anybody, any one of us. But even if we take, all the precautions, all the wise, wise tips from people who live locally from time, from longer than us, that live, people who knows how to live in that particular country, whether this could be the Philippines, it could be, Cambodia, Vietnam, Latin America, any country in Latin America. Of course, in this case, he came from the United Kingdom, uh, 15 years ago. That's what his story, that he told his story a year ago. And that, things were, very much in that on that interview, in which another YouTuber in the Philippines was the one who got that interview. This fellow Greg, who was homeless, and it turned out to be a good story, a really good story, in which he even had a, job offer. People even did help him out, locally, and then, people around the, outside the country, made their contribution in, in a way that, uh, that he had collected some money, and to be able to turn around his life. uh, Even a job offer out of Cebu City, in which, he was out of the city at a farm, in which, of course, he had some disabilities. He had really some disabilities, but not serious disability. He wasn't not an advanced age, guy. Not he was in his early 60s, qualifying for his pension, or his, back home in the United Kingdom. But something that called to my attention was in that interview. That was a year ago, and exactly a year later, he's just dead. Um, and this is the situation in which, he refused time and time and over and over again, not to go back, not to go back, and not to go back to his home country, the United Kingdom, to see if we could, maybe have some help from the government, some social agencies, in which we could have, have longer life. I mean, being on his early 60s is considered in the United Kingdom, the United States, or Europe, anywhere in Europe, it's considered to be a young age. People in, many expats in their 70s, 75, even the fellow who just turned 80, 82 years, 81 years old, not long ago, he was, blogging for the Philippines, from the Philippines, blogging all his life, his routines, his girlfriend. I mean, think about that. I mean, so, and on average, this fellow expat Greg, he was young, 20 years younger than the average, I would say the average, you know, expat in their 80s who live, in the Philippines or Latin America. There are many expats in Mexico, 75 years old, and still making plans for the future, for their life, for, what the future is going to be, and living the best time of their lives, basically. Enjoying their retirement, enjoying their benefits, enjoying the beautiful weather. And that's, this fellow's son, I mean, he was appearing to be in not good health because of his, in the situation he was just living outside. I mean, being homeless, being anywhere, not just in the Philippines. I mean, it's Latin America. If you're homeless even in Chicago, in Miami or New York, living under the bridge in the cold weather, people pass away. I mean, even in New York. I remember in New York City, um, after, I spent like 21 years in New York City. I remember there was always in the six o'clock news, homeless people, froze to death in the wintertime. So there's always people passing, you know, uh, dying from the cold weather, the extreme weather situation, condition of being or living on the street, living just on the street, not sleeping well, not getting, if they're ill, not getting medication, not getting enough, help, mental health. There is always, of course, like in cities like Chicago, New York, or Miami, there's always help from the government, of course, even from church organizations that come and help, and of course there are shelters too, but many homeless don't want to go to a shelter where they can be robbed from another homeless person sleeping, next to a bed. If you're sleeping, most homeless shelter, they're sleeping in the hallway with 25 or 30 other people. So if you have your belongings, even a small little belonging, it can get lost. If you have, a couple dollars in your wallet, your wallet can be stolen in a homeless shelter. But going back to Greg, which, is a familiar face. It's familiar face from most, expats in the expat community in the Philippines, of course. Became a familiar face because of his willingness and his, the brightness of his eyes. He seemed, a year ago, a person embracing life, in which, he was telling us about how he wanted to start business. He didn't want to continue with that kind of life. He wanted to start business like selling something like a street food. Like he told us, all of us, about his experience being a chef, being working at a restaurant, and on and on and on. So after he was, helped, he was really helped from many other experts, collected some money. There was a GoFundMe page on, on social media, in which he, one of another fellow YouTuber was, uh, got the interview that in which, he was talking about. So his case was very well known from in the expert community. His face was very well known. His face, he was a symbol representing expat homeless around the world, basically. I mean, there are expats who are homeless in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in you know, in Taiwan, in China, in Thailand. I mean, in the Philippines, there are other expats. But this fellow Greg, who just died sadly just 2 days ago, was very much, he was very a face well known because of his willingness to talk openly about his situation, how he felt in that situation, which ended up dying. So did he die because of um, lack of because of mental health? Could be. It could be. I mean, maybe he didn't have mental health, mental illness become before becoming homeless. But after sleeping outside, after seeing society, I mean, how he ended up, you know, uh, living in the streets, most likely, if he didn't have a mental health issue, then he acquired, because one thing triggers to another one. I mean, I'm sorry, it's like a domino effect. We always think about that. We always, one of my videos I was talking about um, PTSD, for veterans, veterans who live in the Philippines and, veterans who live in Mexico too, that in which they had acquired PTSD, living, of course, serving their country, serving as a soldier, as a combat veteran, as a combat, in combat units, fighting in Afghanistan, fighting in Iraq, fighting in different foreign lands. So even veterans of the law enforcement, or uh, being a law enforcement officer in the United States or Canada, I mean, it's a stressful job. It's not an easy job. We know that, but the PTSD can kick in, can trigger, at any time in life. It could be during the time they're serving, or it could be after that. But going back to the Greg's stories, he didn't never say about serving in in any combat unit, but he just moved to the Philippines 15 years ago, um, to live, to have that opportunity. He always he did talk about that he had no family members, almost no family members in the United Kingdom where he was coming from, and that his mother just passed away a few years earlier, and that he didn't want to, even there was an offer. I remember those, that interview. He had an offer from somebody, with compassion enough to offer him a plane ticket back to the United Kingdom. But his reply, just hit us like a hammer. Hit us all like a hammer. That he said he did prefer to be homeless in the Philippines, but not going back to the home country, United Kingdom. Even though that in the United Kingdom, he will have, at least some benefits, even with no family members, so that all his family members just passed away, and he didn't know what to go to, in the United Kingdom, So, but it was just like a hammer, in our conscience. How somebody can be so lonely, in this planet of 8.3 billion people. But some people like him, like Greg, because he lost all his family members. He says, I don't know how. I'm not here criticizing or questioning the reason why, in his situation, just being in. But I put myself on his shoes, on his shoes. I mean, it made me think. It made me think that even those of us who can be, in a relatively okay situation, we have, thank God we have a roof on our top and something to eat, and at least have hope and health, good health. Thank God, it's a blessing to have good health. As we think, as I'm thinking, keep thinking about and reflecting myself about life, how life is fragile. And in his case, he was only 61 years old, which is a young age. I mean, comparing to other expats even in their 80s, having good time, living an expat life, a healthy life and peaceful Filipino, in a peaceful and beautiful life in the Philippines, and Cambodia and Vietnam and Southeast Asia and Paraguay, Costa Rica. I mean, there are so many other expats in Mexico. They're, you know, enjoying the retirement. But in his case, becoming a homeless was basically, that's what I think did kill him ultimately, because he was always, really, upbeat, good spirits when he had, so many people helping him out with some, some money, and offer a job offer in like on a farm where he was gonna be, he wanted to be, good for society. He wanted to be, a positive vibe for a society, that he was making his contribution for this Filipino society. He didn't want to go back to United Kingdom, to the to he wanted to stay in the Philippines, but his life sadly ended just 2 days ago. And We don't know exactly the details of what really happened, but he was found unresponsive on the on the street. Of course, unresponsive meaning like somebody, a passerby, just noticed somebody just call. I mean, in the middle of the day, middle of the morning, that wasn't like didn't close eyes and like sleeping, but like he wasn't sleeping. So somebody just with good heart, with good God fearing person came and tried to you know not hello, saying hello, are you okay? Most likely, I mean, and then they have to call the rescue. I mean, the police, the authorities there to find out what was going on him. And just because of the the way he looked, of course, he didn't look like a local guy, local a person like a Filipino. He appeared to be a foreigner. So that was the second striking situation. Most likely people thought, well, this is somebody who really needed help, but he was dead, and nobody was on his side. There was no priest, there was no pastor. Where are the pastors? Where are the pastors? I mean, when we see somebody who's in great help, if we are Christians really, where are we? I mean, can you say I can at least give a little hand? I can say what I'm not here to say what I'm doing, what I don't do. Only God and myself knows what exactly I do for my own. Following Jesus steps. On his step. So he was found dead, alone, nobody by his side. Um, what about Christians? There was nobody there, and just a passerby, you know, came, saw him dead, called the authorities, and that was the end of it. And my only hope is that before his passing, hopefully he accepted, Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior, and that he'll be with God. Hopefully, may God bless you all. And life is fragile, but one more, one more situation in which an expert who came from a wealthy country like the United Kingdom, but ended up, at a very young age, before his time, he ended up like that. Uh, just a good, short reflection of the day, but this help us out all to become a better person. Hopefully, this case is just not a case; it's a fellow human being. It will help me out myself to be a better person, to be to look for those who don't have nothing to eat, of any race, ethnic group, or any nationality, whether I'm here, whether I'm there, anywhere I am. Hopefully this will maybe be, you know it will help me to be a better expert, better human being, a better Christian. May God bless you all, guys. See you in the next video.